Maybe stocking shelves is too complicated for you. The words weren't just cruel, they were loud. Loud enough to bounce off the warehouse walls, loud enough for the half-dozen workers unloading crates to hear, and loud enough to make the laughter sting twice as hard. Nina froze, her hands still clutching the heavy box of cereal she had been about to place on the wrong pallet. Her thin frame tensed under the fluorescent lights, and for one fleeting second, her jaw clenched. She could feel her pulse in her temples. But then, like she always did, she lowered her eyes and quietly corrected the mistake. The man behind the voice was Travis, the new floor manager. Fresh out of business school, his polo shirt was tucked too tightly into his khakis. His blonde hair gelled to perfection. He had been in charge for only 3 weeks, yet somehow he strutted around as though the supermarket was his kingdom and the stockroom workers were his peasants. Travis smirked as the others chuckled. Seriously, Nina, it's not rocket science. Green labels on the left, yellow on the right. Maybe write it down if you can't remember. Nina didn't respond. She knew from experience that words only made things worse. So she adjusted the box, double-checked the labels, and moved on. But the silence was its own kind of spectacle. To the others, her quietness wasn't dignity. It was weakness, and that made her an easy target. The stockroom of Megamart was nothing glamorous. Rows of pallets, the hum of forklifts, the faint smell of cardboard and floor cleaner. To most employees, it was just a pit stop before something better in life. But to Nina, this place had become her cage. She was 31. Thin, wiry, with her dark hair always tied back in a tight knot. Her uniform shirt was too big, the sleeves rolled twice, and her sneakers were cheap knockoffs she'd bought secondhand. To strangers, she blended in so well she might as well have been part of the background. But inside her mind, a storm. Numbers, patterns, equations, things she couldn't switch off even if she wanted to. While others saw shelves and barcodes, Nina saw symmetry, sequences, and invisible logic threading everything together. Once, years ago, a professor had called her a prodigy. She had been 17, solving problems in abstract algebra that graduate students struggled with. There were whispers about scholarships, about a future in artificial intelligence. And then, the mistake, or rather the accusation, a plagiarism scandal in her senior year. She hadn't cheated, but she hadn't been able to prove her innocence either. By the time the dust settled, her reputation was destroyed. Opportunities vanished. The prodigy disappeared into obscurity. Now she stacked boxes. By lunch break, the moment had already spread like wildfire through the stockroom. Green on the left, yellow on the right. One worker mimicked as she passed Nina in the break room. The others laughed. Nina ignored them. She pulled out her tuna sandwich, ate in silence, and stared at the vending machine in the corner. The machine was broken, stuck in a loop where the digital display kept flashing Error 04. Nina's eyes flicked over it once, twice, and she muttered under her breath. It's the coil. 4th slot, 3rd wire disconnected. Error loop because the sensor can't detect resistance. She didn't realize Travis had walked in until he scoffed behind her. You talking to yourself again, Nina? Figures. She shoved the sandwich back into its wrapper. Just noticing what's wrong with the machine. Travis rolled his eyes. Yeah, sure. Because what this place really needs is Dr. Genius diagnosing vending machines. Newsflash, nobody cares. He tapped the machine, kicked it once, and walked off. Nina watched him go, then glanced at the machine again. She could have fixed it in 5 minutes with a paperclip. But why bother? No one would notice, and no one ever noticed. That night, after her shift, Nina walked home through the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood. The sky over the strip malls was bruised purple, and the street lamps buzzed faintly as moths danced around them. She stopped at the small diner on the corner, ordered black coffee, and pulled out the worn notebook she carried everywhere. Inside were scribbles that looked like chaos, numbers, graphs, algorithms. But to Nina, they were serenity. This was the only place she felt whole. On paper, in numbers, in logic.s she wrote. She thought about the day. About Travis. About the laughter. About how the world looked at her and saw nothing. But the thing about outcasts is, they see everything. And though she didn't know it yet, within 48 hours, the same people who mocked her would beg for her brilliance. Because a storm was coming. One that would trap hundreds of lives in that very supermarket. And when it hit, the only person with the mind sharp enough to cut through the chaos would be Nina, the girl who wasn't supposed to matter. The day it happened didn't feel special at all. It was Saturday, the busiest day at Megamart. Parking lots jammed, shopping carts rattling, families arguing in the aisles. Nina was in the back, unloading boxes of bottled water when the first scream came. First, she thought it was just a kid throwing a tantrum. Then the second scream pierced the air, shrill, panicked. Something heavy crashed near the front entrance. She dropped the box and hurried toward the commotion point. 4 men in dark jackets had entered the store. Their movements were too deliberate, too focused, for them to be ordinary thieves. 2 of them carried rifles. One vaulted onto the customer service counter and fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Everyone down!" The store erupted into chaos. Shoppers screamed and ducked behind shelves. A man dropped his basket of oranges, and the fruit rolled across the linoleum like marbles. Nina froze halfway down the aisle. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Heart pounding, muscles tightening. She had seen violence before, in documentaries on TV, but something about the way these men moved was terrifying. Organized, trained. The leader barked commands: lock the exits, kill the power. Within minutes, the automatic doors slammed shut with heavy thuds. The lights flickered, then dimmed. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the aisles in an eerie red glow. The air felt thinner, charged, and just like that, a Saturday shopping trip had become a prison. The leader of the group, tall with a scar across his jaw, pulled out a tablet and connected it to the register system. Nina's stomach twisted when she realized what he was doing. He wasn't just here to rob the store. He was using the supermarket as an access point. "Attention!" His voice thundered across the intercom system, hijacked from the store manager's office. "You are all hostages until we complete our work. No one leaves. No one interferes. Comply, and you live." People whimpered. Parents clutched their children. An elderly man fainted in aisle 7. Nina's eyes darted to the tablet in his hands. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. She knew what she was looking at: an injection attack exploiting the payment processors to tunnel into larger banking networks. Her breath caught. She'd studied similar exploits years ago, late at night, back when she was obsessed with cryptography. These men weren't just dangerous, they were brilliant, and they were about to hijack millions of dollars in real time. But brilliance had weaknesses. Nina saw them immediately. She crouched behind a display of cereal boxes, watching, calculating. The police would come eventually, but she knew response time, at least 10 minutes, maybe longer. By then, the hackers would be gone, with money siphoned through offshore servers, leaving nothing but chaos behind. Her hands itched for a keyboard. She could see the flaw in their setup already. A vulnerability in the way they'd bridged the store's closed system to their open exploit. If someone looped the right signal back through the secondary router, they could slow the attack. By time, her heart pounded harder. This was insane. She was a stockroom worker, not a hero. Nobody expected her to do anything. And yet, she couldn't sit still. She remembered the laughter from yesterday. "Maybe stocking shelves is too complicated for you." Travis's voice, "No." She wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Not today. The hostages were her coworkers, her neighbors, strangers just trying to buy groceries. Travis was here too. She spotted him near the pharmacy, hands over his head, pale as chalk. The mighty manager who mocked her was now trembling like everyone else. She could run, hide, survive. No one would blame her. Outcasts are supposed to survive quietly. But survival wasn't enough. Not when she could see the math of their crime unraveling in her mind like a puzzle begging to be solved. Nina took a deep breath, ducked lower, and began moving toward the back office in the semi-darkness. Her mind whirled with patterns. She remembered the broken vending machine yesterday, how she diagnosed its error in seconds. This was the same, just bigger. The same logic, the same puzzle-solving instinct, except now lives depended on it. When she reached the office door, she found it locked. Of course it was. She knelt, pulled a bent paperclip from her pocket, the same one she'd been fiddling with earlier during break, and jimmied the lock with trembling hands. It clicked open. Inside, the emergency power hummed. Routers blinked. Cash register servers whirred faintly. The heart of the supermarket system lay before her, waiting. Nina slid into the chair. For the first time in years, her world made sense again. The hum of servers was like a heartbeat, constant, relentless. Nina sat in the manager's chair, her hands hovering just above the keyboard. She hadn't touched code in years, but the rhythm of it, the way the logic flowed, came back in an instant, like a language she'd once been fluent in and never truly forgot. She glanced at the surveillance monitor above the desk. Through grainy black and white feeds, she could see the hostages lying flat on the floor, shoppers huddled under tables, Travis pressed against the wall with tears streaking his perfect haircut. In the center of it all stood the scarred man with the tablet. His posture was too calm for someone improvising. He wasn't just a thug. He knew exactly what he was doing, which meant Nina had to be faster. Her fingers tapped lightly. She bypassed the login with an old trick, exploiting a forgotten admin account she'd seen when she was first hired. They never clean their systems, she thought, almost amused. These guys have no idea they built their heist on rotten foundations. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. She wasn't attacking their system head-on. That would expose her immediately. Instead, she created a ghost signal, a false loop that made their injection appear successful while secretly slowing it by fractions of a second. Enough to buy time. It was delicate work. One wrong keystroke and they'd notice her. And they did notice. In the feed, the scarred man frowned at his tablet. He barked something in another language to his crew. One of them, the youngest, jittery, peeled off from the group and stormed toward the back offices. Nina's blood froze that he was coming straight for her. She yanked the chair closer, typing faster. Her hands shook, but her mind burned with clarity. If she could finish the loop, she could at least lock the system in a semi-frozen state. Enough to stop a full transfer. The door handle rattled. Nina dove under the desk just as the door swung open. Heavy boots stepped inside. She pressed her back against the cold metal cabinet, holding her breath, praying the server hum would drown out the pounding of her heart. The man scanned the room, muttered curses, and then kicked the chair aside. His eyes darted over the blinking equipment, but Nina's code was subtle. Nothing obvious, nothing to raise alarm. After a tense 30 seconds, he spat on the floor and left. Slamming the door behind him, Nina exhaled, her lungs aching. She knew she couldn't hide forever. The loop was just the beginning. If she wanted to shut them down completely, she'd have to go deeper, trace their exploit, find the choke point, and crush it. But every second she worked increased the risk of discovery. And if they caught her, her eyes flicked to the monitor again. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, clung to her mother under a checkout lane. The girl's lips trembled as she whispered something no microphone could pick up. The mother just held her tighter. That decided it. Nina wasn't going to stop halfway. She dug in, peeling apart their code injection like a surgeon opening a chest cavity. They were clever, routing through multiple proxies, disguising their trail in financial transactions so complex it would take most analysts hours to even recognize the pattern. But Nina saw through it. Not step by step, but all at once, in the way only her mind could. Patterns aligned, numbers danced. And in her head it was as simple as fitting puzzle pieces. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. "You're not as smart as you think," she whispered. Then the screen flashed red. Intrusion. He cursed under her breath. They'd seen her. In the store. The scarred man barked an order. The jittery young hacker bolted back toward the office. This time he wasn't checking. He knew. Nina's fingers flew. She rerouted her signal, created 3 false traces that made it look like her attack was coming from outside, from neighboring Wi-Fi networks. If she pulled it off, they'd think the intruder was somewhere else. The door slammed open again. The hacker lunged at the keyboard. Nina slipped out from beneath the desk just in time, crouching low, moving like a shadow toward the storage racks at the back of the room. The hacker typed furiously, growling in frustration. "Ghost signal," he muttered. "Someone's in the system." Nina backed out quietly, her sneakers barely whispering against the tile by the time he turned. The door was already shutting behind her. She pressed her back against the hallway wall, her chest heaving. Her cover wouldn't last long. They'd sweep the building, check every room. And when they found her, it wouldn't matter how clever her code was. But she had seen enough. She knew where their exploit was weakest. She had the blueprint in her mind. For the first time since the takeover began, Nina wasn't scared. She was ready. The fluorescent lights flickered as if the building itself sensed the storm about to break. Nina crouched in the darkened corridor, her breath shallow. Every inch of her body screamed for her to hide, to wait it out, to let someone else, anyone else, be the hero. But there was no one else. The police outside had been pushed back by threats of hostages being executed. Inside, the scarred man tightened his grip on the crowd. And the hacker's worm was seconds from opening a direct pipeline to the banks. It was her. Or no one. She slid into a small supply room, flicked on the dusty monitor, and jacked into the network through a forgotten maintenance port. No more illusions, no more ghost signals. This was all in. The exploit pulsed across her screen like veins of fire. It was beautiful in its construction, layer upon layer of obfuscation, rerouting through dead servers in abandoned countries, bouncing signals across the globe. Most people would drown just looking at it. But Nina wasn't most people. Her mind fractured the chaos into symmetry. She saw the weak points where the pattern bent unnaturally, the seams where greed had made their code sloppy. That was where she would strike. Her fingers blurred over the keyboard, weaving traps within traps. Recursive loops, memory floods, algorithmic snares that would collapse their entire network the second they reached full transfer. But she needed one more thing. Access to the scarred man's tablet on the monitors. Nina saw him pacing. His men were restless. The jittery hacker had failed to trace her and now snarled at his boss, blaming phantom intruders. The scarred man's patience snapped. He dragged Travis from the floor, pressed a gun to his temple. "You want to be a hero, huh? Fine. Heroes bleed first." Travis whimpered. The crowd screamed. Nina's pulse spiked. She couldn't wait. She shoved the door open and strode out of the shadows, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Let him go. I'm the one you want." All eyes turned. Hostages gasped. Travis froze wide-eyed, as if seeing her for the first time. The scarred man tilted his head. "And who are you?" Nina swallowed the lump in her throat. "The one inside your system." His smile was slow, cruel. He shoved Travis aside and raised the tablet. "So it's you. I wondered which rat was clever enough to play in my wires." "Not clever enough to hide forever," Nina said, though her voice wavered. She forced herself to stand taller. Meet his gaze. He tapped his screen. Her monitor lit up instantly, red alerts flashing. He was attacking directly now, flooding her backdoor with counter-dash code. It became a duel in real time. His fingers flew, injecting bypasses, brute force commands. Nina countered each one with precision, shutting doors just as he reached them, building walls faster than he could tear them down. The hostages could only watch, the tension stretching tighter with each keystroke. For a moment, he gained ground. He smirked, convinced she was cornered. But Nina wasn't aiming to hold him off forever. She'd been guiding him, funneling his code toward the trap she'd built. When he pushed the final sequence, it triggered the collapse. His system buckled. The transfer froze midstream. Data looped into infinite recursion, eating itself alive. His tablet flashed error after error until the screen went black. "Impossible," he whispered. Nina stepped forward, her voice steady for the first time. "Game over." His rage was instant. He hurled the dead tablet aside and lunged at her, gun raised. For a heartbeat, time slowed. Nina froze. She wasn't a fighter, wasn't built for this. But Travis, for once in his life, moved before thinking. He tackled the scarred man from the side. The gun went off, the bullet slamming into the ceiling tiles. Hostages screamed, chaos erupting. The crew scrambled, but their plan was ashes without the system. Police stormed the entrances, seizing the moment. Shots rang out, shouts filled the aisles. Nina ducked low, heart hammering, as armed officers swept in. The scarred man fought like a cornered wolf, but with his leverage gone and his network burned, it was only a matter of time. He was dragged down, cuffed, still spitting fury. And then silence. Hostages sobbed, clung to each other. The little girl Nina had seen earlier broke free from her mother and ran to her, wrapping tiny arms around Nina's waist. "You saved us," she whispered. Nina couldn't speak. Her throat burned, her chest heaved. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Travis staggered over, pale and shaking. His eyes darted between her and the chaos, struggling to piece together what just happened. You did that?" Nina didn't answer. She just looked at him once, really looked, and then turned away because this wasn't about him. It never had been. The supermarket no longer felt like a battlefield, but the silence carried its own weight. Police radios crackled, paramedics guided trembling hostages outside, and shattered glass crunched beneath boots. Nina sat against an overturned shopping cart, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. She wasn't cuffed, wasn't questioned yet. Just ignored. Like always, she almost laughed at the irony. She had just dismantled one of the most sophisticated cyber-heists ever attempted, and no one even knew. Not why by the time the sun rose. The story had spread. News outlets ran wild. Massive supermarket siege foiled, hackers' cyber attack crushed. Reporters scrambled to explain the collapse of the worm, the sudden blackout in the criminal system. Authorities insisted it had been a joint police effort, though their eyes betrayed confusion whenever pressed. But among the whispers online, in the darker forums, the encrypted chat rooms, the digital underworld, another name surfaced. A ghost, a shadow, a legend reborn. They called her Nyx, the same pseudonym she had abandoned years ago after the smear campaign that painted her as reckless, untrustworthy, dangerous. And now she was back. Whether she wanted it or not. 2 days later, Travis found her outside a quiet cafe, the same one he always went to after work. He looked smaller somehow, humbled. "I didn't know," he said softly, sliding into the chair across from her. Nina kept her gaze on her coffee. "You weren't supposed to. You saved us all. And he faltered, guilt pulling at his features. "I treated you like nothing, like you didn't even exist." Finally, she looked at him, not with anger, not with longing, just clarity. "You saw what you wanted to see," she said. "I let you. That's on me, too." He searched for words, but she cut him off with a faint smile. "You don't owe me anything, Travis. Just don't ignore the quiet ones anymore. Sometimes we're the only ones holding the world together." He nodded, eyes wet, as if the weight of his own blindness had finally settled on him. That night, back in her apartment, Nina stared at her laptop. The glow of the screen reflected in her eyes as messages poured in. Recruitment offers, praise from strangers who knew her alias, warnings from old rivals now aware she was still alive in the digital sphere. She could vanish again, fade back into obscurity, return to her quiet shelves and empty conversations. Or she could step forward, not as Nyx the ghost, nor Nina the invisible cashier, but something new, someone who owned both sides of herself. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed 3 simple words into a forum that had been waiting. "I'm still here." Outside, the city hummed as always, indifferent, sprawling, alive. Somewhere in its veins, crime would brew again, and somewhere else, ordinary people would still dismiss the quiet girl in the corner. But this time, Nina smiled. Because she no longer needed their validation, she had proven it to herself. And that was enough. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. Just like Nina proved that even the quietest voice can make the loudest impact. Your presence here makes a difference to our channel. If today's journey resonated with you, I truly appreciate your support. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe so you can be part of our growing community. Every action you take helps us continue delivering powerful stories that ignite thought and courage. Your engagement is not just a click, it's fuel for the mission we are building together. Once again, thank you for watching, thank you for believing, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, stay strong, stay visionary, and never stop moving forward.